and it's too late, right? And well, dealing with temptation is exactly the same thing. The temptation is sort of like the guy who makes the wisecrack. So it pops out, and if you're not ready in advance, then you end up just giving in. So instead, what you want to do is to imagine that you knew what the nasty remark somebody else was going to make beforehand, and then plan for it. So you've got that zinger ready when it happens. So think about, well, here's the situation where, all my friends are going to be standing around smoking. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to excuse myself and take a step out to the side, or I'm going to put in a stick of gum, or, whatever it is you're going to do in order to avoid smoking in that situation. So you got to be prepared for those kinds of temptations.
I guess drinking's a big one for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, has its own potential problems. Because if you're gonna add an extra drink an hour to what you were drinking already, that could be a problem.
Yeah, no kidding.
Another big thing you got to do is to manage your environment. So a lot of our behavior is driven by what's easy to do in the moment. The brain is it's a light organ. It's about 3 pounds. So it's about 3%, well, 3 to 6 pounds. It's about 3% of your body weight. It uses 20 to 25% of your daily energy supply. And so the brain wants to do everything it does as quickly as possible so that it minimizes the amount of energy it spends on anything. And what that means is that it's going to seek out whatever's easiest to do in an environment and do that. Oh. So part of what that means is you want to make it as hard as possible to smoke, which means, for example, don't buy cigarettes.
Yeah.
And it seems silly, but, I know people who've tried to quit smoking and yet they've kept a pack of cigarettes hidden somewhere in the house, as if the rest of their brain doesn't know that there's a pack of cigarettes hidden somewhere in the house. So
I actually, when I first quit, I had an emergency pack in my center console and I ended up smoking it.
Yeah. It wasn't. Yeah. Even at some point it was a non-emergency pack, and so, yeah, so you have to actually make it really hard to do so that it gives you plenty of time to talk yourself down from the thing you don't want to do. And then the last big thing you need to do is to have some friends around to help. So, have a set of buddies that, when you really want to have a cigarette, in worst case scenario, you can call a friend who will tell you, the 5 reasons that you shouldn't have that cigarette today.
So it's good to tell your community that you're in, sort of, that you're planning to do this. So you're a little bit more accountable to people as well, not just yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because let's face it, right? The worst things we do in life, we tend to do when we're alone. Most people don't do really nasty things in a group. Unless it's like a really big, bad group.
Yeah.
If you're in a gang, you might do some big bad things as a group. But most of the stuff that we do that's really nasty, we do alone. Internet trolls they're sitting alone. If they had people looking over their shoulder while they were making comments, they wouldn't be good. People would be going, don't write that, dude. So if it's good to bring those things that you want to stop doing out into the light of day, so that you're holding yourself accountable, not just to yourself, but to all your friends.
So I want to get a bit more into the goal part of it too, right? Because it really made me think about that somehow when you set a goal for yourself, whether that's on paper or in your thinking process or speaking it out loud or whatever, that your brain actually starts wiring to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the first thing you want to do is to figure out what the goal is that you really want to commit to. And, that sometimes it's easy, right? At some point you wake up, you think, okay, I'm going to quit smoking. It's fairly straightforward to say, yeah, that seems like a good idea. But there's lots of different things we may want to decide to do. Somebody might say, you know what, I'm checking my email too often. I really need to stop doing that. You have to ask yourself, is this something I really want to commit energy to changing? Because it takes some effort to change behavior. And then the next thing you want to do is really to turn the goal that you're that you want to achieve into a process rather than just stating an outcome. Right. So, part of the problem with email, for example, is, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I check my email way too often.
Yeah.
And I can get to the end of the day and think, what'd you do today? Well, I checked 100. I answered about 150 emails. And I can't imagine it. Like sitting in a retirement home someday, going, yeah, crowning achievement was when I cracked 150,000 emails in a month. That's just it's not going to be one of the things I'm going to be bragging about. So, but in order to change that, you have to think about, well, what's really the process for living your life, rather than focusing all the time on email. And so, doing things like set a timer when you get up, when you get to your work in the morning, set a timer for 10 minutes and just triage your email. Find the 3 most important ones, answer those, put everything else aside. When that timer hits 10 minutes, shut your email program off and then do something productive for an hour, and just get the heck away from it. Shut your cell phone off so that you're not tempted to check that all the time, and really focus on doing something bigger, whatever it is, whether it's reading something or writing something or playing a musical instrument, because otherwise a lot of these other temptations, like, checking your messages on your phone, can begin to eat up at the really big things that you'd like to accomplish.
So when you focus on a process orientated goal, that actually does change. I'm trying to get to how that, like, you had some examples in your book, and it was fascinating to me that it actually starts like it clears the path, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of things that happen, right? First of all, when you set this new goal, now all of that stuff that happens with your old goals starts to happen with the new one. I mean, it takes a little bit of time. It's not from the moment you say, I want to do this. You have to actually try the new behavior a few times. But for example, I started learning to play the saxophone about 13 years ago. And so I went out of my way to try to play in the evening after dinner, and to do it consistently. Because the thing about habits is habits love consistency. Habits work best when you do the same thing repeatedly in a particular situation. And so for me, it was, if I was at home and it was after dinner, it was time to play the saxophone. And, I had to tell myself to do it for the first week or two. But after a couple of weeks, dinner time would come. And after dinner time, my body was just telling me, come on, it's time to play. And so very quickly, I had rewired my brain so that the after dinner period was now incredibly strongly associated with playing the sax. And that happens. It happens quickly. That's the thing. Your brain is constantly growing new connections. It's not a static thing. It's constantly changing. And so, behavior change is possible for anyone in large part because as soon as you set a goal and start, create a plan, which is important. You want to have a specific plan for when you're going to do something. And after you do it, even a few times, your brain starts to learn that this is something you do. And before too long, your brain is actually suggesting to you, hey, let's get back to the thing you're supposed to be doing now.
Can that be influenced by people other than yourself?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I do in the book is I try to point out that, a lot of us are not only trying to affect our own behavior, but we're actually trying to influence other people's behavior as well. And it turns out that the principle for influencing other people's behavior isn't, a lot of times we treat that principle as if what we're trying to do is just find the right message. If I could only tell you the right thing, you would change your behavior. But in fact, changing somebody else's behavior is just as difficult as changing your own behavior. And you have to do all the same things. So you have to, if you're trying to help somebody else to change behavior, you have to help them to set a new goal and help them to create a plan for when they're going to do stuff and help them to deal with the temptations and help them to manage that environment and try to influence their environment as well. And then be a person that they can rely on for help and support as they're trying to change.
What about in a more malevolent sense?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that'll work too, right? I mean, if you have ill intent in mind, you can try to help people to. I mean, think about the classic heroin dealer, right? The whole first one's free.
Yeah.
They're trying to help you create a habit that'll be hard to break. So, unfortunately, though, influence is a neutral term. We can influence you for good or for ill, but certainly there are people out there who don't necessarily have your best interests in mind.
And can that be done, like, say, on a more mass scale, like why people keep, insistently eating at places like that they know aren't good for them? And
so you're talking about like media brainwashing and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't like to say brainwashing.
Well, but it's the thing is, it's not just. I mean, media is a
habit
piece
forming,
of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so think about about some of the fast food chains, for example, that are everywhere. Well, what have they done? Right? They've influenced the environment because they've made it incredibly easy to engage the product, and it's available and it's easy to do. The commercials involve lots of people performing the action, which increases the strength of that goal in you, because when you see somebody else doing something, it makes you more likely to want to do it. A lot of those restaurants have big glass windows on them, so when you walk by them, you see all the people in there eating, which makes you more interested in going in and doing it. They're trying to influence what the environment smells like, so that the environment is associated with the action. Right? It's like walking by the popcorn counter at the movie theater.
Yeah.
Except the popcorn is that food that smells way better than it tastes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, those advertisers, they are, doing a lot to try to create goals and maintain those goals. Even though people will say, yeah, I know I probably shouldn't be eating some of that fast food. It's not good for me. Again, we are wired to do the thing that feels right in the short term. And for most animals, they can just live their life doing the thing that feels right in the short term, because that's set up to allow them to do the things they need to do to survive. It's only because as humans, we're so good at manipulating the environment that we've managed to create all sorts of ways of satisfying these short-term urges without giving us the long-term benefit they were supposed to have, right? I mean, if you were a hunter-gatherer 150,000 years ago, if you came across something that was high fat and high calorie, you should eat it, because who knows the next time you're going to come across something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking of that with your with the food thing and the diet thing, because that's one of the things for me, like trying to cut back on sugar and stuff like that. I have a bit of a sweet tooth, and you talked about this is the immediate gratification thing, right? You talked about the what the heck muscle, and I call it my off fuck it muscle. So if I have a donut or a piece of chocolate, like I literally just go, go fuck it, and I just have another one and another one until I've like satisfied some sort of sugar craving, and I don't like. It's so weird, but I mean,
I'm like that with sour soothers.
I can't think of like the immediate repercussion. Like I can't correlate the calorie intake then to me trying to like shed